We are working with a DOE patented scientist here in Pittsburgh to look at hydrothermal liquefaction, taking sludge, human waste, fats, oils, and greases. We are testing on site with our sewer authority the ability to convert that into SAF. And we're working with the Carnegie Mellon's Scott Energy Institute. We have a lot of intellectual resources here. We have physical resources here. We're perfectly positioned. So why wouldn't we do this? Produce on site, blend on site, and export.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. My guest today is Christina Cassotis. She is the CEO of Pittsburgh International Airport, one of the most trailblazing airports when it comes to sustainability. Christina believes that the airports around the world need a right to grow. And for enabling that, she's producing SAF on site, or at least plans to, from multiple pathways. Pittsburgh International Airport is already fully off the grid and it produces its own energy. And she is looking to not just have SAF on site for its own airlines, but potentially export it to the eastern seaboard of the US as well. That's very, very interesting for me, having spoken to multiple airport executives. Now, Christina and I go back a long time, and it's always great to speak to her again, hear this, and be bedazzled by what a visionary airport executive can do. Christina, it's so good to be speaking with you finally on the podcast. I think the last time I interviewed you on stage was in 2011 in Abu Dhabi. So we go back a long way. And
we do.
This time round, you've made quite a mark in the last decade or so at Pittsburgh Airport. And I'm very curious about a comment I heard you make, which is that you said that the aviation industry must earn its right to grow. Can you elaborate how Pittsburgh Airport is approaching sustainable growth under you?
Yes. So first of all, thank you. I'm thrilled to be back with you. And I do remember Abu Dhabi in 2011. That feels like a lifetime ago. I haven't quite been here for a decade. I'll hit a decade, which is shocking to me, in January of 2025. So close to a decade. So to your question, I feel strongly that we need to earn our right to grow in a number of different ways. And the way that we're doing it at Pittsburgh is we're focused on all things that make a good sustainable business, like obviously environmental sustainability, but also workforce sustainability, as well as financial sustainability. I mean, in order for a business to sustain itself, it needs to have the resources, and those resources need to be replenished, and they need to be available, and we need to be flexible in figuring out where the inputs are going to come from. So from an environmental sustainability perspective, in reference to that term, earn our right to grow, there's a lot of pressure in parts of the world for aviation to perhaps slow down, perhaps curtail demand. I don't think that's good for the world. I don't think that's good for world peace. And I don't think that's good for global economies. So in order to make sure that aviation can continue to grow and become ubiquitous for people who perhaps haven't been able to take advantage of it yet, we have to fly cleaner. And what we're doing here in Pittsburgh is looking at our own operation, which is why we built a microgrid. We are completely 100% off the grid, and we have been for 3 years. And that's for our terminal, our airfields, the hotel. I mean, that's everything. We are off the grid for our airport operations. And then secondly, we're looking at pathways to sustainable aviation fuel production on site. Very important. We have 3 pathways. I can talk about them. And we're also looking at distributed hydrogen for our own ground service vehicles, other ground service vehicles, and really all this ladders up to we want to be the place for research and development around cleaner, greener fuels and making sure that Pittsburgh can take advantage of all of the resources at Carnegie Mellon and, the attributes that this community has. How do we bring them together at the airport to help the industry?
Wow, there's so much to dig in there. I've spoken to a number of airport CEOs on the podcast and off the record as well. But I think most of the conversations are around, do we build some electric charging infrastructure? Or where do we store hydrogen in case hydrogen comes in? Or where do we get staff? What you're talking about is completely on a different scale. But I need us to step back for a minute because I remember when I was living in Pittsburgh, and many people do not know this. I've actually studied and lived in Pittsburgh for some time. It used to be a US Airways hub. Then you lost that hub status. But in the last decade, you have actually built up air service again into Pittsburgh. Can we just get a feel of Pittsburgh, its air services, who it serves? Because it's not just one small airport in the corner of Pennsylvania, is it?
It's not one small airport in the corner of Pennsylvania, but that's exactly what I thought when I got recruited for the job. So when I got the call from the recruiter, I remember thinking, I recall, and you do, I'm sure as well, when US Airways pulled down the hub, there was a big gasp in the industry. People, I think, looked around like, wait a minute, how can they just do that? And especially because it left the bondholders with $750 million worth of debt. And in a residual airport, that gets distributed among the remaining carriers. So they had 100 gates here, 4 runways, and 2 baggage systems. This was built for US Airways. The design, the architecture, the way that this airport worked was very specifically built for US Airways. So when I got here 10 years ago, almost in January, it had been 10 years since US Airways had left. They really took down the hub in 2004. So when I was interviewing in 2014, I remember I got off the plane from Boston, I landed and I looked around and I thought, this looks like who did it and ran. It looked tired and empty. And when I spoke to the board and said, okay, look, the hub days are over. There's a million reasons for it. I'm happy to explain them. But airlines don't serve airports. They serve markets. You've got a good market here. We can become a really great origin and destination airport. And that's what we've done is we've built towards a diversified carrier mix. We have every single airline, domestic airline here with the exception of Hawaiian, which I keep telling people, don't hold your breath, and Avelo. And we have rebuilt international. We have increased cargo. There's a lot that we've done because first and foremost, you got to be safe or airports don't work well. But second of all, you really do need the right airline service to serve your market. So there's a lot of focus on that and making sure that we're taking care of the airlines by only going after the routes that make sense, supporting them, and then making sure that we can maintain them. So it's not like they come in and we're like, okay, done, see you, move on to the next. We have a pretty robust team of people, and I would say throughout the organization, who understand that air service, development, and maintenance is not up to a department. It's up to every single one of us.
Wow.
So when I got here, just quick example, when I got here, each airline would get up to 13 invoices a month from us. That's not a good business partner, right? How do you make sure that, that when the plane pulls up to the gate, everything is ready? And operationally, I would say that this airport was always absolutely fantastic. But I would say the business operations and the support departments were not. And so we have spent a lot of time building not only the full organization, but, the talent and the talent pipeline and process around how do we not go back?
I have to, a lot of the benchmarking around the industry is pre-COVID, post-COVID growth. I want to go back and ask you, What are the numbers like for Pittsburgh, both in terms of traffic and revenues, compared to 2004 when US Airways was there? Do you have that off the top of your head?
Yeah. So I can tell you that we're beating so 2004 is when there was still a little bit of connecting traffic. We just had our board meeting on Friday, and September this year was up, I think, 5% over September of 24. So, it's the busiest September in 20 years. In terms of revenue, I'd have to pull it and I could get back to you. I don't actually know that off the top of my head.
That's totally fine, because where I'm going with this is if traffic is up. If traffic is up, then surely emissions are up, isn't it?
Well, yeah, traffic is up. Yes. And we have, we've had to flip on parking lots. We're paving anything we can because we're running out of space, because we now have a really meaningful percentage of ultra low cost carriers, which, it changes the mix when it comes to parking. And we actually adjusted the pricing to some of our parking lots to match. We thought, okay, well, if you have a no frills bundled airline, let's do a no frills bundled parking product.
Unbundled parking.
There's no shuttle service. You're going to walk.
Wow.
But it really is, how do we meet the market where it is? And how do we take care of really a wide range of airline business models? Because in the United States, as you know, all of the airlines sign one operating agreement. We don't get to negotiate with each airline. So the lease that we just signed in the middle of the pandemic, because the old 30-year lease with US Airways expired, we, that has to work for the network carriers, ultra low cost carriers, JetBlue, Southwest, International, Globe. It has to work for everybody. It took us, I think, 2 years to negotiate that lease.
Why would international airline like British Airways pay the same as, let's say, an Avelo?
Listen, the way that the airport operating agreements work at U.S. airports is they don't. It's up to them to choose how much office space they want to lease. Do they want to be a signatory carrier? Do they want to say that we will always need 4 gates? So there's a way for the airlines to choose what their pricing can be, but we have to have a terminal rate, a landing fee that applies to everybody. So it's really a question of, how big their operation is. Frankly, the busier they are, the busier we are, the lower the costs, because because passenger traffic drives so much of our revenue mix. So, or revenue period.
Got it. I have a question. You alluded earlier to building your own on-site sustainable aviation fuel tanks, hydrogen storage and transportation facilities. Where is this coming from? We usually don't hear this from airports.
So first of all, we extract natural gas on our site. We sit on top of the Marcellus Shale, which is the largest natural gas deposit in the United States, literally under the airport and around Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio. It's big. So before I got here, the airport had put out a request for proposals, and we have a company, CNX, that has wells and on site on the property. FAA approved it, and they extract natural gas. So that's why we thought, well, why are we not generating our own energy? And that was the impetus for the microgrid. So we built the microgrid, which actually was commissioned as a public-private partnership. That was commissioned in June of 21. We are 100% off the grid. I think we're the only airport in the world that's completely energy independent.
Wow.
The grid
I
is
will
your back.
Find out.
Okay. Please do, because I can't, I know people have cogen or they have, but everything, the terminal, the airfield, all 8,000 lights on that airfield, the hotel, the Hyatt Hotel, and the Sunoco gas station, off the grid, 100%.
Wow. The only airport I know that is trying to do that is the Red Sea Global Airport in Saudi Arabia, because it is so far out from anywhere that they have to be on grid. And John Pagano told me how they're trying to become completely off.
Okay.
It's not open yet.
Okay, then we might be the only one. So that's number one. Number two, and by the way, we didn't pay for that, right? So that was a public-private partnership, put it out to bid, locked in energy rates for 20 years, cut our carbon footprint, and we're resilient. So check. then you look around and you think, okay, we sit on 8,800 acres or, 3,500 hectares, which compared to Dallas and Denver is small, but compared to a lot of other U.S. airports is really big. And we have natural gas. Oh, by the way, our microgrid is natural gas and solar. So we also have we were the first solar facility in the state of Pennsylvania to be allowed to build on a landfill, which is on our airport. Now they're being built across the Commonwealth on landfills. So yay, impact, right?
Wow.
That's the goal here, is how do we impact the industry and how do we, quite frankly, elevate the role of airports in global aviation? I don't think airports are always considered sexy. Airlines are, manufacturers are, airports aren't. And we started to really look at the whole issue around cleaner, greener, and thought, well, how do we participate in this? And started to look at our assets. US Airways left us fuel tanks. We don't need 4, we need 2. So we have 2 tanks available for blending. Okay. We have a pipeline to the river that brings the Jet A up into the airport. So if you have certified fuel, you could actually export fuel. Think about that. And then we have a lot of land. We sit in Western Pennsylvania to the east and to the west in Pennsylvania and Ohio. We sit in the middle of millions of acres of bio-based feedstock. So we started to talk to the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, and all of a sudden people were looking for where can you produce? And we thought, well, why not right here? Why wouldn't we do it here? So we're talking to an alcohol to jet technology company, and we are looking for that to be the first. We have that would be the feedstock would be ethanol, but also we're supporting 45V, the legislation that would allow the U.S. Treasury to give tax credits for things like nuclear, not for us, but fugitive methane capture. That could be a very important feedstock in that production of SAF. So that's the second pathway. And then the third, we are working with a DOE patented scientist here in Pittsburgh to look at hydrothermal liquefaction, taking sludge, human waste, fats, oils, and greases. It's what Firefly is doing in the UK. And we are testing. We are testing on site with our sewer authority the ability to convert that into SAF. So and we're working with the Carnegie Mellon's Scott Energy Institute. They're really excited about what we're working on because they're working on hard to abate industries. So we have a lot of intellectual resources here. We have physical resources here. We're perfectly positioned. So why wouldn't we do this? Produce on site, blend on site, and export.
Wow. This is, this conversation feels like I'm speaking to someone from BASF rather than an airport CEO. A lot of the times when I'm speaking to airport executives, it feels like I'm speaking to someone who works with a shopping mall. They are primarily looking at, how do you save your, reduce the carbon emissions? So just turn on the air conditioning or turn on the heating for a while and you can save it. And that doesn't make them any different from the shopping mall next door. What gave you the vision to think beyond your scope 1 emissions? And now you're talking, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, potentially scope 4 by producing your own energy as well.
It's the way my brain works is I see opportunity, right? I call it the art of assembly. I don't believe that you need all the right conditions to do the right things. I think that the fun is figuring out how to get big stuff done with the resources you have and with a group of pretty ordinary people who just want to do the right thing. So it just feels like this is a big industry issue and we can do this. I mean, we don't know how when we start. We sort of build a plane while we fly it is the way we think. So the way that we think around innovation is just start and see what happens. And so it's not like we had 3 business plans all built out and we knew exactly what we were doing. We just thought, can't we do something here? Isn't there something here? And so the first thing was really we put out an RFP prior to the IRA being passed, nobody responded. Nobody. And then we thought, okay, well, is there anything we should be looking at? And so we became a little bit more proactive in understanding what it would take, understanding, what's happening in Washington. And I don't know, things just started falling in place, and we just kept going. As I say to people, this is our side hustle. We run an airport. But what I've learned in the last 2 years is fascinating. And I work with a group of people. I'm lucky enough to be able to work with a group of people who just think, well, why not? Why shouldn't we do this? And why can't we? And it turns out Pittsburgh has this huge history of energy innovation, because that's what Carnegie needed to power those steel mills. So when you start to realize, wait a minute, we're just standing on the shoulders of people who went before us. This is our legacy. Why wouldn't we do this? All of a sudden, lots of people say, hold on, maybe I can help. And that's what's so great about this community is it's a little bit of like, no, let's just give it a shot and see what happens. And all of a sudden, here we are.
Wow, I love the legacy. Thank you for sharing that historical lesson and context as well. Yeah. Now, you've done this before. You've got the microgrid. You produce natural gas and solar already, power from there. What challenges do you foresee in scaling up SAF production and use at Pittsburgh Airport, and how do you address those?
I think the biggest issue I see with SAF production everywhere, it is the issue, is the uncertainty in the in the regulations and the uncertainty in. I mean, it's a nascent industry. It's early days. We don't have a global book and claim system. We don't have certainty in pricing. Their technology is happening so fast. So I think that the biggest issue with scale comes from the investment, right? Why would investors invest if they don't know when if the IRA tax credits aren't going to last past 27? So I think that there's some certainty that the investment community needs in order to make those final investment decisions. And I think that there's also work to do with global aviation regulations around the SAF, life cycle. Now, how do you prove that it's the right SAF? There's a lot of concerns around the integrity, the reporting. So, I mean, I think that's normal in any big startup, and this is a startup industry. I mean, so the uncertainty comes from the fact that it's early days, but that I don't think we have the luxury of waiting.
And I think frankly, you're right. There are a lot of uncertainties from regulations to policy to price. Yep. Is it a consideration for you to own to be a SAF producer yourself as an airport? I mean, Delta owns a refinery.
No, it's not. We'd have to stand up a huge team that, the airlines guarantee our rates and charges. I don't see them jumping and saying, go ahead, hire 48 more people. It's why we didn't build the microgrid. That's not what we should do. It's not our core business. I do believe that we are a platform. I believe that we're a platform for businesses to do what they can to make the world a better place. And we want to be part of that. We want to host them. We want to convene, facilitate, certainly want to make sure that a little piece of the revenue stays here so that we can reinvest in capital. There's a lot of deferred maintenance we're still catching up on after all those years of not having the money to do much. So I think there's a lot that's in it for us, and we really want to impact the industry. We want to share learnings. That's why we're working with Scott Energy Institute. We want other people to be able to say, oh, wow, let's think about this. And we're very interested in airports being part of the solution.
Right. I love that vision. We spoke about SAF. What about hydrogen? You mentioned hydrogen is also on the card, but that's a different beast, right? Transportation, storage, it's all different.
Right. So again, this 45V legislation would allow for a pretty big hydrogen hub in Western Pennsylvania. And that's something that goes way beyond us. That's something that the energy producers here, our labor partners, and business, the economic development agencies are really focused on. So what we're looking at is, okay, well, what do we do with that hydrogen if it's available in the area? And what does it mean for storage? What are our uses? One of the things that I'm very interested in is alternative fuel for ground support vehicles. I'm all for electric, but it's not all electric all the time. You don't want an electric snowplow. Okay. I'm not investing in electric snowplows, but hydrogen powered snowplows are interesting. So is there somebody who wants to test hydrogen powered snowplows in Pittsburgh? Great. We'd love to help them with the R&D on that. What does that mean for hotel shuttles? You know, we see ourselves as a hydrogen hub in essence. We have public transportation buses that come out here. So one of the issues for us is what are the use cases that we can test and we can deploy right here at the airport. And then we've also invested with the same scientist who is working on the hydrothermal liquefaction. We actually spent a year, funded a study for distributed hydrogen that would be able to create hydrogen without the big cost, because the big issue with distributed hydrogen is how can you do it in a way that isn't terribly costly. So he has proven that he can convert natural gas to hydrogen. And now we want to test it at the airport, which would also allow for blue hydrogen by capturing the dimethyl carbonate and using that for batteries. And you could do it in something the size of a container on the back of an 18-wheeler. So
wow,
I know.
Horrible.
So but the reason we care about hydrogen is A, we're a hub, and B, it's a key input for SAF. So if you can lower the cost of hydrogen, you can lower the cost of SAF. And back to your question, it's the way I look at everything is what's the ecosystem? It's like, what do we control? But what influences what we control? And, you know, if you start going out further and further, you start to realize there's a lot of opportunity in some of the outer rings. And if we can play there, that might help us here.
Wow, this is fascinating. I love how you're turning yourself into an innovation hub. Come test out hydrogen facilities and end products. Come test out SAF facilities and end products. But ultimately, this is linked to demand from airlines to use the SAF, demand from perhaps other airports or other airports who you will ship this hydrogen or SAF to. Can you share with us how you're working to build this demand up for Pittsburgh as well?
So it's ongoing. We right now, you know, if you talk to folks at IATA and you take a look at, you know, what the commitments are of the industry to 2050 goals, you realize we're not close to being able to meet it. But nearer term, we have 2030 goals that as an industry we've committed to. And my feeling is if we can get started, we would love to see hydrogen produced SAF being produced by late 27.
On site at Pittsburgh Airport.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And do airlines ask you how much the SAF will be? What the group
is
going to be?
Yeah. And we say, I don't know, because we're not doing, like, we're not in charge of the pricing. We're not. So this is what we're trying to understand is, okay, well, what's going to affect that? You know, one of the developers we spoke with said, well, we need certainty on pricing and commitments. I'm like, they don't even do that on the Jet A unless they hedge for, you know, how many years. I think this is what we know we can do it. We know we have the facilities. We know we have the brain power. We know we have the partners. I think the real question is, how are they going to get to that final investment decision and what do they need? So there's the IRA. We're working on state tax incentives. We're looking at what can we do to bring that cost down. So quite frankly, the closer it is to Jet A, the faster the industry will adopt it, right? We want to help accelerate adoption. The only way to do that is to produce at scale. So I don't know. I wish I had all the answers. We just keep like what, you know, when things get overwhelming, we just take the next step. You just take the next step, the next step, the next step. And if you keep going, then all of a sudden you keep going. And if you don't, all right, well, we tried. Right. But we really do believe this is possible, and we believe we're the place to do it.
Now, amidst all of this, you're also building a new terminal.
We are. It's right outside my window. Yeah.
You're building a new terminal. What are you doing differently in this new terminal that makes it sustainable and operationally efficient?
So what we're doing in this new terminal is we're actually looking at who's going to use it, what a concept, and beyond the airline. We care a lot about our airline partners. But when we talk about operational efficiency, my first question is who's benefiting and why are we doing it? It's like innovation. My first question is always, why? Who's this going to benefit? What's the point? So the new terminal for us is an opportunity to line up the physical facility with the new business model. We're an O&D airport. We're not a hub, right? So we don't need the half-mile train connecting landside and airside. We don't need two separate baggage systems, one for the hub carrier and the other for everybody else. We don't need a customs and border protection or international arrivals site on airside, meaning people have to go through TSA just to get to their car. So how do we fix all that? The new terminal is really meant to be obviously much more environmentally sustainable. That's not hard. This one was built 34 years ago. So just construction materials, processes make it cleaner and greener in itself. We've got outdoor terraces planned as part of this. We'll do rainwater recapture in order to irrigate those. We ripped up ramp in order to make space for this new terminal. That ramp was the concrete was crushed on site, and it's the base layer for the new roadway system. It's LEED Gold. There's a lot that we're doing in order to make that new terminal more environmentally sustainable. There's a lot of natural light, which comes in through the roof design, which allows for these It's a better passenger experience, and I would say it's a better passenger experience for different types of passengers than perhaps airports were usually built for, which was the day traveler or the business traveler, right?
I think the day travel has changed dramatically. There's the rise of workation.
Yes.
I often travel with my kids when I have, long haul trips, work trips, for example, needed. When is this terminal going to be ready, Christina?
Next year. So third quarter-ish. Yeah, we'll open next year. It's a big deal. I look out the window and I think, how are we going to get that done? But we've got a great team. The garage is pretty much done. The roadway system's just about finished. We're on the interiors now, for the terminal itself. Structurally, it's dried in, it's heated. There's electricity. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
This is exciting. I was speaking recently to someone in Europe, with the European Council, and they were talking about how for many larger airports, a significant amount of flight emissions are actually on the ground. This is during taxi. This is during, when they don't have GPU or APU, things like that. Are you specifically looking at operational efficiencies on the ground and working with flight partners?
Yeah. We are. And part of that is through, so you mentioned innovation. So because we have all this space, you always look for the silver lining. We took 10,000 square feet of terminal space and turned it into what we call our X Bridge. And that's where we test technologies that perhaps had never considered aviation ever. We've hired somebody from the startup community who goes out and says, hey, have you ever thought of come see what happens. Come see if you can do anything at the airport. That's been amazing. We've actually tested and piloted up to 30 different companies. And the other thing we test there is materials. So the paint on the columns, the architect had an idea of what he wanted. And we said to our painters, okay, go ram baggage carts and strollers into it and patch it and tell me what it looks like.
Interesting. Yeah, so you have a lab.
Yeah, it's our lab. And so we are very focused on sort of any and all innovation, and we want to be pushing the envelope to make sure that what we're doing is going to work for the people who work here as much as the passengers. So they can take better care of the passengers. We can take better care of the airlines. It's just, how does everybody benefit? And what is it that we can think of differently that might have different results that are better? So operational efficiency is one of the things we're testing. Airfield efficiency with airline partners. We actually have a formal agreement with IAG to do a lot of testing here in Pittsburgh. which is a hub of robotics and AI and automation companies spinning out of CMU. And so we put the industry and airports and airlines together. For the last 2 years, we've done that at a conference here called Future Travel Experience. Yeah. And we'll host another one next. It's either April, May, or June. I can't remember, but that's going to get announced soon. But the goal is, how do we put all of these these companies, these leading edge companies working on really cool stuff who've never thought of aviation together with an industry that, quite frankly, could use a little innovation. So, wow. And then we test it. We test it out here.
This is amazing. I love the spirit around sharing as well. I can imagine if IAG is doing some testing, they would not just apply it, they would share it. Or if you're doing some testing, you would share it with with Carnegie Mellon, for example, and the institute you're working with. Let's say if you had a genie grant you all your wishes, what are we looking at 5 to 10 years from now? What is the best case scenario for Pittsburgh International Airport and the role you can potentially play above and beyond being a good airport in terms of, being a beacon of hope for global sustainability initiatives at airports?
I love your question. I would say that 5 to 10 years, the wish list is that we are producing SAF at scale. We are exporting it through the Mid-Atlantic and East Coast. That other airports around the world are with similar, similar attributes are saying, cool, let's learn from you. We're part of a global consortium of airports that's sharing information around energy sustainability, environmental sustainability. I would say that it's a premier passenger experience. Airlines feel like this is where we know we are going to get the straight story. And so let's keep testing and working together to make the industry better as a whole. I mean, that to me, it's always been about the ecosystem, and we aren't separate from each other, right? You cannot have effective airline service if you don't have good airport infrastructure. So how do we build it? How do we share that knowledge? And quite frankly, if it's only us, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because people go somewhere and they come back from somewhere. We want all the airports to be doing everything they can and to help the industry and to help their communities. Because really, quite frankly, when the airport is doing everything it can, it returns tremendous value to its community. More people get to work there and more jobs get created, and that's a good thing. So to do that intentionally and thoughtfully, I think it helps everybody.
Wow, that is a grand vision, because I think one of the best things I've learned is if you want to learn something well, just teach it. Mm-hmm. Here, it seems like if you want to be a good user of SAF and hydrogen, then figure out how to export it and send it and
or create it.
Create it.
Either, or where are you in the system? I mean, listen, JFK is not going to probably produce SAF. That's okay. So what is their role, and how do we make sure that we can get it to them effectively? And who else can be producing in order to power the planes that are taking off from the gateway airports that are going into Europe that might have mandates that tax them? I just don't want to see a negative reinforcing loop where demand gets curtailed and we're back to the days where only a few people can fly. That's not good for us. It's not good for the world. So yeah, I'm on a mission to save the planet, save the world, and have more people fly. It's a great thing. It's a great thing for people to experience travel. And I believe in it. Like, fundamentally, I believe in it.
Flying is indeed magical. I'm a true believer. And thank you for doing what you are doing, because I can assure you, at least in the 100+ episodes of this podcast over the last 2 years, I have not spoken to an airport CEO who's thinking of exporting SAF and hydrogen.
Let's see. I hope we get there. I hope we can do it. That's the dream, but we're closing in on it. So we'll give you an update when it's time. But thank you,
Christina. Thank you. So the final part of this interview is called the rapid fire round, in which we get to know you a bit more personally, right? And this time is something simple. Like, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite book?
My favorite business book is Who Says Elephants Can't Dance by Lou Gerstner. That is, it is one of my, I have reread it several times and I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love reading books from people who actually ran businesses as opposed to just people who study businesses. That makes sense?
Yep, absolutely. There is a kid's book that my girls brought home from the library as well, which had a dancing elephant. So,
really?
Yeah, exactly. It's his name is Pringle, and he's.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I know that. Yes, that's very fun. Okay. And then I have one other favorite book, which is Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott.
Oh yes, Anne Lamott,
right?
Fantastic. Have you attended anything that she has done in person?
Yes, once in New York City, and I was like a fangirl. I was like, "Oh my God, it's Anne Lamott." Yeah, no, I'm a big fan.
Okay, my wife is a big fan of Anne Lamott, and she introduced me to her writing. And then when she bought Bird by Bird, I read it first. Yeah, and yes, huge fan. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right.
Favorite airline, Christina?
Oh no. Not doing that.
Yes, come on.
I can't. I can't.
Okay, how about this?
Pan American World Airways. Yep.
No. Okay. How about a favorite airline that does not fly to Pittsburgh?
God. A favorite airline that does not fly to Pittsburgh? Well, Emirates or Qatar. Singapore.
Now we're talking.
Okay.
Now we're talking.
Yeah, but I haven't been on every airline, so I don't feel qualified, right?
Okay, favorite city?
So my favorite city that I travel to is London because my dad, who was a Pan Am pilot, the only place he ever took my brother and I was London. I was 10, my brother was 7, and it just felt like magic. But one of the cities that I'm dying to get to is Dakar.
Dakar? Why Senegal?
So my dad died 25 years ago. He was 58. And I remember there were cities in the Pan Am days. These guys would fly a world region for like 3 years at a time. And he would come home with the food and the stories. So Tokyo, Rome, Buenos Aires, Dakar, and London. Those were his favorite places. And I've never been to Dakar. So that's where I want to go.
Here's a fun fact. One of my really good friends is the head of air service development for Air Senegal. And they got new A330s and they just started flying to DC. So maybe you can get some service in.
Listen, how about if I just go to Senegal and meet your friend? Because then I'd know somebody. That sounds awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Favorite movie?
Oh, let's see. My cousin Vinny. I like movies that make me laugh. The world is too heavy sometimes. So A Fish Called Wanda, Girls Trip. I mean, I'm pretty based like that.
Okay, sounds good. Something that you would like to learn?
Skateboarding.
Okay. When are you doing that?
I've always wanted to skateboard. I don't know why. It just feels like it would be a blast.
Okay, fantastic. Skateboarding. I would not have imagined, but why not?
But I'm sure people have very, very highbrow answers here, but I'm pretty, I have a son and I feel like, who by the way is a film major, and he watches like these really heavy, deep movies. And I feel like, I just need
skateboarding. Okay. So what is it that you do in your free time?
I travel a lot. It's my favorite thing to do. I cook. I read a lot. I like hiking, biking, skiing.
Wow. Okay. Lots of outdoors there.
Yeah.
What is the best advice you've received?
If you know people, you know business. If you don't know people, you don't know business.
Love it. Good one. Okay. And if we are speaking 1 year from today and we are popping champagne, what are we celebrating?
That there is a date for a shovel in the ground on SAF, and that the terminal opened and it did not feel like day 1. It felt like day 20.
Brilliant. Love it. Fantastic answers. Thank you, Christina. It's been a pleasure speaking.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simplifying, that's simply with an I.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simplifying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simplifying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our Supervising Editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Meera Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Ligia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Drimen is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.